Sponsored by the Shadow Government. Legalize Arcane Barrage.
Hello again, this is Preheat. Welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. So today we're going to be talking about Arcane Mage in patch 11.1.5. So with the slight nerfs to fire and the buffs to Arcane, Spellslinger is looking like the premier mage spec to play in Mythic Plus. And both it and Sunfury are actually really good in raid as well. So this video is going to cover everything you need to know about Arcane. That's going to be how it compares to fire, which talents to take and where, how the tier bonus works, gearing, overall strategy for Arcane, the opener, the rotation for single target, and AOE. Before we begin, just a quick reminder, I do offer one-on-one coaching. So there's a lot of free options out there, plenty of those if you are looking to refine your gameplay or to play new spec. And if those are working out for you, then that's great. Happy for you. But some of you may not have the time or the experience to be able to immediately identify your problems. So over just the past year, I've helped hundreds of mages and evokers improve their gameplay in these one-on-ones. So if you're just not getting it, or if you feel like you're doing well, but you still want to improve, check out the Metafy link. It's going to be in the description below and also at the top of your screen. And with that, on to the video. All right, so let's start off by talking about Arcane versus Fire. So Fire is still probably the better spec to play in the raid for most bosses because of the benefits that it gives, not necessarily in just the pure damage. It's really just kind of like the whole picture. So this is a very cleave-heavy raid, and there's a lot of opportunity to spread Ignite and a lot of free cleave there, and that means Arcane is also good, but a lot of it has to do with Ignite, where Arcane may not be necessarily able to cleave. So the best example I can give you is on Mugsy. Whenever you have the prisons on Mythic, you can actually spread Ignite through the walls by basically teleporting into one of the jails and then teleporting into the other jail after hitting Ignite on the mob, and then you're able to spread Ignite through those walls. So there's like technical reasons why Fire might be better. Also on Mythic Gallywix, if you're progressing that fight, basically there's this job where you have to dunk a bomb, and then afterwards if you die, you blow up and the entire raid dies. And you just can't beat a cheat death. Like, the barrier is very strong, don't get me wrong. Arcane has really great defensives, especially with their prismatic barrier. But it's no cauterizer, right? Having a cheat death is just always going to be better when it comes to survival in a pull in a progression environment. So I still recommend Fire for the raid. That being said, though, if you want to try out Arcane in the raid, I definitely recommend trying out Sunfury. There are some fights where you can go Spellslinger. It'd be like the more cleave-heavy ones, the more add hectic fights, right? So like Stick Spunk Junker, Rick Reverb, One-Armed Bandit. Those are going to be probably the best bosses to try out Spellslinger, and you'd want to play high voltage on those. These words will make sense later once we cover the talents. But essentially what I'm saying is, I think if you're doing the raid, sticking with Fire is completely fine. But if you do choose to play Arcane, you might play Sunfury on some fights, and you also might play Spellslinger on some fights. It just kind of depends on the encounter. When it comes to Mythic Plus, I'd have to say that Arcane is definitely just better than Fire. I mean, you can definitely do really good damage as Fire or even Frost in Mythic Plus, but when it comes to like what it brings to the key, like what your niche is and how you fit into the current meta, typically in the current season, what you're having is like two classes that do just a crap ton of AOE, and then there's Arcane Mage. And Arcane Mage isn't necessarily doing the best numbers in AOE. It's kind of hard target capped at 5, but you do have AOE in the form of Arcane Orb because you're playing Spellslinger. And what you mainly have is you have really good prio damage, so you have funnel, right? As the key level goes up, the tanks are going to generally pull less mobs. So, you know, if you go into like your weekly 10, you may have a tank who's super geared who pulls the entire room into the boss, and then you just do everything in one big pull. If you're doing that, it's probably going to be better to play Fire, because you're doing such high target counts. But as the target count goes down, as it approaches like 5 to 8, that's where Arcane has kind of its sweet spot and where it does really, really fantastic damage. And because of reverberation, all of that damage that you're doing on that primary target with the other targets around you is basically getting amped. And you get a lot more damage in Execute, a lot more damage whenever you're AoEing, and a lot more barrages because you're able to generate more Arcane charges faster. So yeah, Arcane is just really good at kind of like killing the mob that needs to die, right? It's a good prio killer. It has funnel. It's very sturdy. It has good utility in the form of its barrier. It brings all of the same things that Fire brings, except for it doesn't have Cauterize, but instead just fills a better role because you're able to take down the high health target while the other two people in your group, usually like a Boomkin and a Death Knight, do all of the big mass AoE for the group. All right, let's talk about the basics of Arcane. So Arcane has two resources. That's going to be how much mana you have and also your Arcane charges. We also have a lot of other buffs that we're going to track, and a lot of those are going to be just as important as the resources. So just keep in mind stuff like Nether Precision, Intuition. These are going to be ones that are going to be super duper important later. We'll talk more about those on the talents portion. But essentially, our arcane charges, we're supposed to build these with various builders. Okay, so Blast is probably the one that comes to mind immediately. It's kind of funny. Blast is probably the worst builder whenever you have low arcane charges. I'll just go ahead and demonstrate why. If I cast Blast at 0 arcane charges, it's like a 1.8 second cast, and it does 86k damage. That is just absolutely terrible for the time spent. It costs basically no mana, but it is just horrible damage per execute time. If we do it again, the cast is faster, and that time it crit, so, you know, we had 400k there. But, yeah, still pretty bad damage. If we do another one, even faster, and then this one hit for 578k critical. And then now we're doing one at 3 charges, and this one is hitting for 343 non-crit. So you can see as this thing revs up, you are spending a lot more mana, but it's also doing a lot more damage, and the cast is much faster. So it's basically a builder, but not really, because we don't want to use this if our arcane charges are lower. There are much better things we can do to get our arcane charges at least like to 2 or 3 before we start using Arcane Blast. But we do have to be careful because we can blow through all of our mana really easy here. And we are going to have to find ways to get that back. So the main way that we get mana back is going to be either through our cooldowns or through a spell called Arcane Barrage. Arcane Barrage is a spender. All right, so basically whenever you use this spell, it dunks all of your charges and it deals damage. And the damage depends on a whole lot of different things. There are like a million different talents that increase the damage of Arcane Barrage. We're going to talk about those interactions and when you want to barrage later. It's going to take up probably the most of the video, most of the time that we talk here. But yeah, basically, whenever we use this spell, it gives us back mana depending on how many charges we had. It hits additional targets depending on how much charges we had. And it also just deals more damage based on the buffs it has and all sorts of other factors. But the goal here is basically get to 4 charges and then use this in most cases. There are exceptions. But yeah, let's move on. So another builder that we have is Arcane Explosion. Arcane Explosion, it's funny. It actually hits harder than Arcane Blast. And it's hitting every target, right? So 136k, if you remember before, my Blasted 0 charges did like 86k. So it's actually just better. And if I do an Arcane Explosion here, like you can see it hits all the targets, right? So not only is it hitting harder in single target, it's also hitting AOE. And it gives us a charge, and it's only a global. So much faster, much more efficient, better damage. This is a great way to get your charges back up if you don't have better options. Definitely better than Arcane Blast, since we have access to Arcane Explosion always. You know, if you're below 2 charges, like you just don't want to cast Arcane Blast ever. You'd want to cast Arcane Explosion to get back up if you somehow find yourself in that situation. Now, one of the best ways to get charges is Arcane Orb. Whenever we cast Arcane Orb, it's going to give us a charge right away, and then it's going to give us a charge per enemy hit. So if I orb back here, you see I get 3, and then once it makes contact, it gives us 4 there. We get some splinters from it too. So Orb actually performs differently depending on the source. If it's you gain the extra charge. So if there's 3 enemies, and I press my Arcane Orb, I'm going to instantly have 4 charges no matter what. Okay? But the random orbs we get through Frost Teachings here and also the Orb Barrage talent, these two do not give you the bonus arcane charge. It's just based on how many targets it hits. Okay, so just keep that in mind. At 3 targets, these two would only give you 3 charges, whereas if we cast it ourselves, that would give us 4. Now, orbs are a precious resource for Spellslinger and AOE because basically every time we have an orb, we can just instantly get back to 4 charges. But it's not something we want to use right after Barrage always. We want to wait and see first if we got a refund because there's, you know, a very high chance. You know, we're getting like a 40% chance here from Orb Barrage to get a refund on our arcane charges because we have a 10% chance per arcane charge. So basically, you're just rolling the dice to see if you get a refund right away whenever you barrage. We also have the orbs randomly shooting out of us because of Spellslinger. So this is another way. Now, we also have cooldowns that give us 4 charges as well. So the first one I want to talk about is Touch of the Magi. I don't know why it's not showing up here, but we can just search it. So Touch of the Magi generates 4 charges instantly whenever we use this. And it's a 45-second cooldown. If we have 4 charges, like we're going to want to barrage into the touch because, you know, if we already have 4 charges and we're about to get 4 charges, we might as well dunk our charges right as we get them. So typically the rule is if you're going to Touch of the Magi and you have 4 charges, you just cast Barrage and then touch as long as it's before the barrage hits. Otherwise, you're just using touch right away just to get the 4 charges, probably queued from the spell that you cast it from, like Arcane Surge or something like that, because it actually accumulates damage over time. But yeah, so that one is very effective at giving you charges. We also have evocation, which gives us 1 charge. This could be somewhat relevant for high voltage, especially in like single target. But yeah, 1 charge isn't all too much. And then we also have missiles, and this is only going to give us charges if we have this high voltage talent. But basically how this talent works is whenever we deal damage with the missile, so whenever the missile actually makes impact after its travel time, it has a chance to give us an arcane charge, and that chance goes up and up and up and up for every missile hit where we don't get the arcane charge back. So typically whenever you use your missiles with this, you're going to get 1 or 2 charges, but it depends. If you have multiple targets and you have Aether Attunement, this is the AOE missiles, it's basically going to instantly refill your charges because you're just having so many hits of missiles. But we can kind of play around with the travel time on this. Again, we're going to allude to a lot of stuff here that we're going to go into more details later in the video on. But essentially, high voltage is something that we can make very, very good use of. It is a very potent way to get our arcane charges back. All right, when it comes to gear, stats, and trinkets, basically you should just run what Raidbots tells you, right? Just sim your own character. That's the best way to know what's going to be good. But I'm going to give you a general guideline. So Arcane kind of doesn't want to stack all haste, right? As Fire Mage, obviously, just the more haste, the better. It never really gets that too bad where you wouldn't stack it. But as Arcane, you kind of want like a spread. So you do want haste. It's probably your best stat up into a certain point. And then you're also going to want versatility. And then depending on if you're doing like single target or AOE, it's going to be different here on this third stat. So Mastery is going to be better for single target. And then Critical Strike is going to be probably your best stat in AoE once you've gotten a certain amount of haste and versatility. Just, again, follow the sims to see whatever it tells you to do, but you're going to want to prioritize crit. The best way to manage this, because you're going to need to move around your stats a lot if you're playing Fire, Arcane, and Raid and Mythic Plus, is just get rings where you can kind of swap around stuff that has like very high verse or very high crit. There's a lot of options for rings that kind of do this right now. Like I have this Fated Championship ring. This thing has a ton of crit on it, so if I'm doing Mythic Plus, I can just swap this thing in, and I can fulfill that crit requirement. And you can even use the sockets and enchants on the rings to kind of fix your stats too. So again, just look at your sims, see what it tells you. When it comes to other stuff, so trinkets, you're going to want the Mug Jug, most likely. This thing is just crazy strong. It's very overtuned, and it's also crit, so it's great for Mythic Plus. So yeah, love to have this trinket. And then if you have a Spy Masters from last season that's 6 of 6 mid track, so that's 639, congratulations, you have your best in slot raid trinket. It's pretty dumb, but yeah, this is actually your best in slot raid trinket. Now just know, if you didn't get your hands on this thing, it's not all over for you. The House of Cards is actually very, very competitive, and in fact, if you have a mid-track House of Cards, you're basically losing no damage there. You can just run the mid-track House of Cards, no big deal. It's a 1.5 minute cooldown, so it still works really well. Obviously, having an on-use trinket like this is going to be a problem if you're using a very special weapon. We'll talk about in just a little bit. But yeah, just sim the trinkets as well. I think the Rick Reverb radio is also a great alternative if you want to run 2 passive trinkets. You can also go with the Eye of Kazan. This thing is really great if you basically just stay in combat forever. As you stay in combat longer and longer, it just gets better and better. And if you're fortunate enough, and I haven't been yet, but if you get a Neural Synapse Enhancer that's mid-track, and you can take it all the way up to 678, make sure that you are using that thing. That is like Giga Best in Slot, all right? It's a 45-second cooldown. That is perfect for Arcane. And what this does is it just gives you a ton of intellect for every one of your Touch of the Magi's, or I guess most of them, because Touch of the Magi has a slightly shorter cooldown due to shifting power, but it's going to line up a lot, especially in Mythic Plus. This thing is just absolutely fantastic. If you have a hero track one, it's probably not good enough. You need a nice fat weapon, right? Item level on weapon is really, really important, so if you do not have a mid-track one, do not use that staff. It is really bad to do that if it's only hero track and you have access to like 678 weapon. But yeah, typical setup has Ascendance in the offhand, and then you're doubling it on one of your crafted pieces. But if you're using the staff, what you're going to do instead is put the Dawn Thread on one of your pieces, and then another Dawn Thread somewhere else. So this one right here, this is the one that gives you critical strike. If your health is high, very strong in Mythic Plus, this is what I recommend. When it comes to the tier bonus, our 4-piece is giving us Aether Attunement and Clear Casting just randomly. It's a jackpot proc. So you just get it, you get a spell damage increase, you get the Clear Cast, you get the Aether Attunement. That's the buff where whenever you missile, it does like a big AoE missile that hits everything and it hits harder. The one that you don't want to necessarily cut off early. Yeah, this thing is super duper strong, and you also get one guaranteed every time you use your Touch of the Magi. So that's going to be really, really powerful in AoE. When it comes to hero talents, both of Spellslinger and Sunfury, both of these have a lot of value. It just kind of depends on what you're doing. I would definitely recommend Spellslinger for Mythic Plus across the board, but when it comes to raid, you could play Sunfury, you can play Spellslinger. On certain fights, Spellslinger is going to be better if there's any AoE going on, but Sunfury is probably going to be better in single target. Slightly higher single target damage. But let's talk about what they actually incentivize. So every spec in this game has kind of like a baseline incentive, something that you're wanting to do. And then the hero talents add another incentive on top of that. So for Spellslinger, it's anything that causes a splinter. So we get splinters whenever we consume Nether Precision. That's the buff we get whenever we use a clear casting. So if you get the little parenthesis icon, it's this spell right here where you shoot the missiles, right? This is going to give you those 2 Nether Precisions right there. So spending those with either a blast or a barrage is going to give you 2 splinters. We also get splinters whenever we cast Arcane Surge. That's our main cooldown. And this is giving us 8 splinters, and it also gives us double splinters for the duration of the buff. In addition to that, we also get splinters whenever we orb. So orb is actually on the table as Spellslinger. We like orb a lot because it gives us splinters. So casting orb feels really good as Spellslinger, and it gives us a ton of extra damage. We also have Spellfrost Teaching, which just gives us random orbs whenever we splinter. So not only do we get splinters from the orb, we also get orbs from the splinters. It goes both ways. In addition to that, we also have the Magi Spark Explosion giving us splinters. So it's very important that we're exploding our Magi Spark. More on that in just a little bit. And then we also have Splinter Storm, which is just completely a passive thing. It's going to be proccing all the time in our cooldowns. But essentially, this is just like a really cool looking animation. It's the one where your splinters line up above your head and all shoot out at the same time. You don't really have to think about this too much. Just know that you're getting a lot of clear casting from it because it does have a chance to proc the clear cast. Now, on Sunfury's side, we don't have the same incentive for orb at all. In fact, our incentives have shifted completely to just casting as many Arcane Blasts and Arcane Barrages as possible. And the only other spells we're wanting to use are spells that make those abilities either come up faster or do more damage. So Sunfury gets more execute damage. It has 130% damage bonus on Arcane Bombardment. So, you're just doing more damage in execute, which is really great because a lot of the fights this tier have dedicated execute phases. By the way, just to clarify what I mean by that. So if an execute phase has any sort of speed increase you can do beforehand. So like, let's say it's based on a timer. That's just a normal execute phase, and the damage you do in the first phase matters because it, gives you more time to kill the boss and execute. But a dedicated execute phase is a phase that starts whenever the boss reaches a certain percentage. And so basically all the damage that you dealt before that point doesn't really matter. It's about just killing the boss in the execute if it's especially threatening. So Mugsy has one, One Armed Bandit has one, Gallywix has one. A lot of bosses have these dedicated execute phases now. And yeah, it executes just really good in the raid. So that's one of the reasons why Sunfury is probably better if you're raiding. Also, we get just a lot more barrages, so mana is less of a concern. I will say, whenever you're raiding and you play Spellslinger, it will feel a little bit RNG. Like a lot of the time, if you're not playing high voltage, you'll feel like you're kind of starving for mana. As Sunfury, that's not really a problem because you're constantly getting Glorious Incandescence. So essentially, after you rev up your orbs, which is every 6 Arcane Blast or Arcane Barrages, you use the Burden of Power. This is just going to give you damage on your next blast or barrage. And then you get Glorious Incandescence, which is giving you 20% increased damage on your Arcane Barrage, and it refunds 4 charges. This is basically the exact same effect as what we had whenever Aether Vision was around, except for it doesn't have 2 stacks. So yeah, it's a 4 charge refunder, increase the damage on our Barrage, and we're going to be using this a lot of times, so getting a ton of mana back. And then after you get done with your cooldowns, so once Surge ends, you're going to have the Arcane Soul window. You can basically just machine gun barrages. You'll still want to get Nether Precision on those, but essentially every barrage you do is refunding all 4 charges, and it's also giving you a clear casting, so you'll always be able to have Nether Precision up for all of those barrages. In addition to that, it also increases damage over time, so it kind of ramps up. But yeah, this is pretty fun to do, honestly. Like, it feels fun to just be able to run around in machine gun barrages. So again, if you're playing raid, I highly recommend trying out Sunfury. It's just there might be situations where Spellslinger is better because there's more AoE to be done. Oh, and one more thing about Spellslinger, it actually has better defensives because of reactive barriers. So whenever you use Prismatic Barrier, if you're missing health, it's actually going to increase how big your barrier is. So this is really strong. All right, let's talk about talents. And I'm going to start with single target for Spellslinger and Sunfury, and then we'll talk about AoE. So important stuff. Nether Precision. We need to make sure that we track this buff. This is whenever we use our Arcane Missiles or even Arcane Explosion with clear casting, which we kind of want to avoid. But if we use missiles, we're going to get our next 2 Arcane Blasts or Arcane Barrages increased by 20%. This is going to be a buff that we definitely want to stack with a whole lot of other stuff. So it's definitely something to keep track of. But yeah, typically the Arcane rotation is just going to be like missiles, blast, blast, missiles, blast, blast, missiles, blast, blast. And then you're sometimes going to replace one of those blasts with a barrage if you want to just boil it down to like the most simple version of Arcane. Down here we have Arcane Cleave, which is just more damage on our Arcane Barrages for every Arcane charge we hit. This is why Arcane Barrage can cleave. We also have this talent right here, Resonance, which we don't take in single target anymore. But basically what this talent does is it makes your Arcane Barrage hit for increased damage every time you have like additional targets. In single target, you take Energized Familiar instead of this talent, but if you were to do like a cleave fight, you'd probably pick up Resonance, and then if there's even more cleave, you would also want to pick up High Voltage too. But yeah, we'll get to that later. Anyways, so Arcane Tempo, this talent is actually a lie. It says consuming Arcane Charges increases your haste. You don't have to have Arcane Charges, you can just Barrage. It's just Barrage. I don't know why the words are wrong there. But yeah, you can see the buff up here. This is a buff that we do want to track. We want to make sure that we refresh this at the last second. We want to keep our tempo up. Don't let that tempo fall down because it's actually a pretty considerable amount of haste since it stacks 5 times. And then we also have Intuition. So this is one of the most important talents. It says casting a damaging spell has a 5% chance to make your next barrage deal 50% increased damage and generate 4 charges. What it doesn't say in here is that it only lasts 3 seconds. Now, this is kind of a pain since it's random, right? But actually, what if I told you it's not random? Yes, believe it or not, this is another talent that just lies to us. And in fact, we have a Weakaura where we can track exactly when Intuition is going to proc. So you can see it right here on my UI. I didn't make this Weakaura, but it's very useful. Basically, once you get to the last 3 here, whenever it turns green, you have a chance to proc it. So if I Arcane Explosion, even if it doesn't hit anything, there's a chance for me to proc it there. Now it's like a 50-50 chance if I use it. And I didn't get there, and now I'm guaranteed to get it on this hit. And there it is, Intuition proc. As you can see, it goes really fast. But yeah, basically it just counts down from 11, and then whenever it's at the last 3, you have like a 33% chance for it to proc at 3, and then 2's 50% chance, and then if you get to 1, like you know for a fact you're going to proc it. So you can basically just like cue a barrage from whatever spell you're casting, because you know it's going to be coming out. It happens really fast, like Intuition goes away really quickly. And this is one of those buffs where we definitely want to make sure we're making use of this. So it actually sets one of the situations where we actually barrage without having 4 charges. Because remember, if you don't have 4 charges and you use barrage with Intuition, you still get the benefit of the Arcane charges back. So this is actually another way for us to generate Arcane charges. Very important talent. Moving down from there, we have this talent, Consorium Bubble. This is like pretty good in single target, although we will probably drop this as we go more into the AOE. We also have Touch of the Magi. This is one of our main cooldowns. We already talked about this one a little bit, but this generates 4 arcane charges. It also accumulates damage. So as we put damage into this thing, it just grows and grows and grows, and then it pops at the end and does a bunch of damage. In addition to that, it also gives us increased damage on our first blast, barrage, and the 2 seconds of our first missile. It's going to deal double damage. Okay, so whenever you're approaching your Touch of the Magi, there's an incentive here to have your buffs already stacked, right? If I have a nice fat Arcane Blast with Nether Precision, maybe even I have something else. If I was Sunfury, I might have Burden of Power or something like that. If I blast into the Spark, it's doubling the damage on that blast. If I barrage into it, which has a lot more modifiers, it's doubling that barrage. So barrage has a ton of damage modifiers, right? We've got our Nether Precision up here. We've got Intuition, which is giving us more damage. We've got Resonance if we're AoEing. This is giving us more damage there. We also have Arcane Harmony, which is increasing the damage on barrage, and this stacks 20 times for 5%, so it can double our damage there. We also have Execute damage, so we're just doing double damage in Execute because of this. We also prime the target with Arcane Debilitation from missiles, so basically every missile hit we do is making the target take more damage from our barrages. And then there's a bunch of other stuff too, but essentially the point is that there's just a ton of ways to scale Arcane Barrage damage up, but whenever we hit in this Touch of the Magi, the first barrage gets doubled, and that's like a more multiplier. So the incentive there is like, if you have a bunch of stuff ready, you may not necessarily want to barrage right before your Touch of the Magi unless it's like literally right before, and the barrage will hit in the Touch of the Magi, right? So if it's like trying to tell you to barrage like, 3 to 4 seconds before the touch, maybe with Intuition or Glorious Incandescence, you might think twice about using that barrage and maybe hold it for the touch. We'll talk more about that in the rotation portion, but yeah, it gets pretty advanced. Basically, Barrage is like one of those spells that just gets a crap ton of modifiers on it. It has a point where it just becomes too strong to ignore. Like, you have to just send it. But if mana wasn't a concern, we might play differently, but we do have to care about our mana. So, yeah, there's like kind of dual purposes to Barrage, and because of those dual incentives, sometimes we just have to Barrage. Anyways, moving on. So the tier bonus gives us Aether Attunement. I mentioned that earlier. Aether Attunement makes it so that basically every 3 times we clear cast, we get this buff that makes our missiles AoE, and it deals more damage. But most of our Aether Attunements we're going to be getting are either going to be like random proc jackpots, or they're going to be stuff like our Touch of the Magi. Whenever we use Touch of the Magi with our tier bonus, we are guaranteed to get one of these. So yeah, you're going to get it plenty more than just every 3 clear casting. But keep in mind that missiles is really worth it, right? It's going to be AOE, so it's scaling your Harmony even faster. It's hitting a bunch of targets with Arcane Debilitation. It's giving you more value out of High Voltage. It's doing more damage in general. It's just very strong, and it's going to change how we approach missiles typically whenever we get it. And we don't want to waste it, right? If I'm about to use Touch of the Magi and I have an Aether Attunement, I want to spend the Aether Attunement first ahead of the Touch of the Magi. That way, whenever I use Touch of the Magi and I get one for free, I don't override it. I don't waste it, right? So that's pretty important. Moving on to the AoE version of Spellslinger, you can see a couple things change here. So we got rid of Time Loop, which is just giving us more debilitation. It's much better for us to have more barrages in AoE. That's the incentive. Just basically get as much barrage damage as you can. So High Voltage is really, really great for getting back our Arcane charges. We have to get our Arcane charges back for us to have nice barrages. And this is just a fantastic way to generate Arcane charges. Also, like we mentioned, Resonance, right? We're picking this talent up. This is giving us more damage in AoE. We like that, but everything else mostly stays the same here, at least for Spellslinger, because we do like orbs, right? Orb Barrage, great talent. Gives us back, Arcane charges in the form of orbs. Even single target, we like this talent. So in AoE, it's even better. Okay, moving on to Sunfury. So Sunfury is a little bit more vanilla when it comes to the talents. There are talents you could take like into Mythic Plus. I'm not really going to get into those because I don't really recommend Sunfury in Mythic Plus. So I'm going to stick to raiding here. If you are raiding as Sunfury, this is basically the build you're going to run 9 times out of 10. We do have 1 point into Prodigious Savant here because we don't want Orb Barrage. It's not necessarily giving us value here, so we kind of just take that one out. Although you could pick that up if you're, for some reason, doing AoE as this build. But Resonance is the one that we definitely should pick up if there's ever additional targets, right? So if it's pure single target, it's Energized Familiar. That's going to be the pick on Sprocket, Monger, Lockenstock. And if it's more than one target, we're probably picking up Resonance instead. And for the most part, just lock it in with these. Keep in mind, since Sunfury has more barrages with Glorious Incandescence and stuff like that, the mana is going to be a little bit easier, right? We don't have to worry about getting as many barrages off, so we don't have to worry as much about High Voltage or Orb Barrage. Although, if you were to take Sunfury in the Mythic Plus, you'd probably want both of those. Okay, so let's take a look at the Arcane Opener. We'll do an extended example here. So before the poll begins, you can increment your intuition if you're using the Weakaura, right? So make sure you check that one out. I like to start with 6. I don't know if there's an exact number that's the best. I just find that 6 for me works. So obviously just feel it out for yourself. But yeah, basically 6 allows me to get an intuition barrage off really early in the Touch of the Magi. And that makes sure that I get the Magi Spark. So I like just going with this. But yeah, so this is Sunfury Opener, just to be clear. Before the poll, make sure you get your mirror images out. You can also Mass Barrier if you want, or Barrier. And then we're going to want to cast Evocation here at about 4 seconds. And we want to full channel this Evocation. We want to let it fully channel because we want to get the Siphon power. Even though we don't need mana, we want the Siphon power stacks. You can see them up here. So you can see I have 7 of those, which means that I have fully channeled my Evocation. I'm going to start channeling this missile basically as the boss is pulling, and that way the travel time on it, if you look right here, the first missile basically makes contact right as someone's probably pulling the boss here. This might have been just slightly too early with my distance, but yeah, basically the spells are going to be hitting here, and this is where the boss is being pulled. And then you're wanting to clip this missile because it's non-Aether Attunement. So this is a bit advanced. You don't have to necessarily do this if you don't want to, but if you don't have Aether Attunement, you can cut your missiles short. Now, the easiest way to do this with Surge is to just mash your Surge button so it goes off as soon as basically the 5th tick of missiles is going off. But if you have like a Trinket in your macro, or you have like Potion in your macro, or something else that's like off the GCD, just be aware it will clip your missiles earlier than you want it to, and that's bad. Okay, so I'm going to manually do it, and I'm going to do it with my Potion, Trinket, etc. So I manually do it right here. And now I'm going to Arcane Surge. Now, Arcane Surge is always the next thing you're doing, but the question is what you're doing next, all right? So you're going to be using Touch of the Magi right after this Arcane Surge. If I have 4 charges here, I'm going to use Barrage into Touch. If I don't have 4 charges, I'm going to cue the Touch of the Magi from the Arcane Surge here. Now, keep in mind, in this exact example here, I got a little unlucky because I was hitting the target dummy before I started recording, and so I built up an Aether Attunement. This is something you generally want to avoid, but there's nothing I can really do about it here because I don't have the ability to use a clear casting to get rid of my Aether Attunement. So I am going to munch one here. This is just something I'm pointing out because I want you to be aware that like you should try to avoid this. But in most cases, you're not going to have this happen because, you know, your Aether Attunement is not going to already be stacked up before the pull, right? So it's just kind of a weird situation at the dummies. But yeah, anyways, so as this surge finishes, I'm going to instantly touch the Magi. It's going to happen right here. Okay, it's queued from the surge. What that means is that it's going off at the same time surge goes off, so the damage from the surge actually goes into it. You can see it happening there. Okay, and you're immediately casting Arcane Blast. Do not waste any time. Cast the blast right away. Touch of the Magi is off the global cooldown. You can literally mash it as you're surging. It'll go off instantly whenever it finishes, and you're immediately casting Arcane Blast, right? Don't have delays. Delays are how you lose damage as a caster. You need to always be casting spells, right? Touch of the Magi has no global cooldown. Just make sure you mash that sucker. And if you do it with Barrage, you'd mash it after Barrage, but just make sure it's up before the Barrage hits. That's the main thing. Anyways, so Blast is going off right here. I'm going to do basically the normal Arcane rotation, which is just Blast, Blast, Missiles, Blast, Blast, Missiles, Blast, Blast, Missiles. But occasionally I will Barrage as well. Okay? So, yeah, anyways, we'll let this play out. We'll get into the Barrage conditions later, but I'm going to do 2 blasts here, and then I'm going to do another missile. And this missile has Aether Attunement, so I'm going to let this one fully channel here. And you can see as this is ending, I do have an Intuition proc, right? It procced here. So I need to make sure I Barrage. And I want to Barrage basically as the missile is ending here before my Intuition proc goes away. If my Intuition proc was going away a little bit sooner, I would probably have clipped this missile even though it's Aether Attunement, because I want to make sure I get that Barrage off. But here it's fine. I've got, you know, 2 seconds to spare. We're all good. So I go ahead and Barrage right there. And then that triggers the Magi Spark. That's the big explosion you just saw. Okay. So make sure that you're triggering this. If you're playing Spellslinger, especially make sure you're triggering this because it's super important. It's giving you splinters. Okay. But this is AOE damage. Even in Mythic Plus, you're going to want to trigger this on the Touch of the Magi. So again, to trigger this, it's just 1 blast, 1 barrage, 1 missiles. If you checked all 3 boxes, boom, big explosion. All right. Anyways. So for the rest of this touch, I'm just going to keep going with my blast, blast, missiles. If I do a barrage instead, basically that takes up one of them. So I'm just going to blast here. Now, I don't track it down here, but I am somewhat aware of my tempo stacks. It's just that right now I don't really have tempo stacks. Also, if you're at the very end of your Arcane Surge, you can Barrage. So right here, I'm channeling the missiles, and I think it just perfectly lines up where I Barrage right there, and then Arcane Soul's up. So, yeah, in Arcane Soul, which is what we're looking at right here, you're basically doing Barrage, missiles, barrage, barrage, missiles, barrage, barrage, missiles over and over and over again. It depends on what you come in with, right? So right here, I have 1 nether precision. So if I barrage here, I'm going to spin that. And now I'm going to use my missiles. And I'm going to clip this missile, even if it's Aether Attunement here during Arcane Soul. And I'm going to barrage twice here. I have intuition, so it's going to go barrage, barrage. Even if I didn't have intuition, I would still barrage twice there. And now I'm going to do a missiles here. And I'm going to be able to fit in at the very last second here. I'm going to be able to fit in 1 last barrage. And that's how you always want to do it. You always want to end on a barrage with 3 clear casting exiting the Arcane Soul. Boom, there's the barrage. You see I get my 3rd one right there. So 3 clear casting. I also have Glorious Incandescence. And basically the name of the game right here is you just want to use Shifting Power. But in this case, I'm probably just going to spin one of these missiles and spin this Glorious Incandescence in anticipation of it, just so I can make sure I'm safer on my tempo stacks. And just to get these out, it's just the way I play it. But you could also just immediately rip the Shifting Power. That'd be fine too. The only reason why you wouldn't Shifting Power here, though, is if you have buffs up still. So if you had Arcane Surge still up, if you had Siphon Power still up, any of those things, you would not use the Shifting Power yet. Let the Arcane Soul finish. Okay, it's very easy as Sunfury because Arcane Soul always happens after Surge. But as Spellslinger, be aware of your Siphon Power, be aware of your Arcane Surge. And if you get a Time Anomaly proc, which is like a random Arcane Surge proc, then don't Shifting Power, wait. Anyways. So I go ahead and spend here, and then now I'm Shifting Powering. Just as long as you Shifting Power before Touch of the Magi is coming up, you're fine. The worst thing you can do with this spec, and single target and an AoE, is to desync your cooldowns, okay? So you need to make sure that whenever you Shifting Power, you're getting full value on Touch of the Magi, you're getting full value on Arcane Surge, you're getting full value on Evocation, all right? If you miss that window, if you're too late, you know, it's usually like 15 seconds on touch. You're starting to get really close, right? If you miss that window, you might want to wait to use it after maybe your next Touch of the Magi, okay? But you can still use it later. It's just, you know, you are going to be desyncing just a little bit. Every second you desync your Touch of the Magi is another second you're going to have to wait to use your big cooldown set. So it's just really, really bad to do that. You're basically wanting to use Touch of the Magi on cooldown and you're wanting to get full value out of it on Shifting Power, do not let Shifting Power off-sync your Touch of the Magi. Anyways, leading up to Touch of the Magi, if I have a buff like Glorious Incandescence, you know, I don't have to spin that right away. I can hold on to it, and it's better if I hold on, because right here you can see I have some Harmony stacks already. Basically, if I keep building here, Harmony stacks, I don't have to worry about my tempo falling just yet. Now I'm working my way up to having max stacks, right? So right here, I'm at 15 stacks. There is a case for Barrage where if you're above 18, you want a Barrage. I don't necessarily track that too hard. I don't have like a Barrage helper or anything that I use, because whenever I use a Barrage helper, I just end up focusing too much on it, and I don't like that. But I will say, like, it kind of just naturally works, right? If you're just like making sure you have nether precisions on Barrages and you're kind of milking your buffs, like your Glorious Incandescence, your Intuition, and you're acutely aware of your tempo timing, with a little practice, it's pretty easy to get these down. But right here, this is going to be a fat Barrage, right? Because I have 15 stacks of Arcane Harmony. Touch of the Magi is coming up right here. I can cue the Barrage from this touch, or sorry, from this blast, and I can touch right away. And that's what I'm going to do here. And that's going to refresh my tempo right at the last second. So right there, tempo gets refreshed, and now I apply touch before the Barrage makes contact, right? Boom, and then I get an Intuition proc. So right here, I want to get another precision and use this proc here. I didn't do that, but I would want to missile first right there, because I don't have nether precision. So make sure you get your nether precision up. And then Barrage here, right? Glorious Incandescence, the way I treat Glorious Incandescence and Intuition is, if I have the ability to use it with like 18 stacks of Harmony, with nether precision up, I'm going to be sending those. And I'm going to try to build whatever I can in the meantime, right? So if an Intuition procs, I don't have nether precision, I'm probably going to use a missiles before I use it, as long as there's time to use the missiles. It's very short though, right? So if I don't have time to use that missiles, I'm just going to send it regardless of my charges, regardless of nether precision, regardless of everything. Like if Intuition is about to expire, I'm going to use it before it expires by just barraging. Same goes for Glorious Incandescence. If I'm about to lose it because I'm about to get another Glorious Incandescence, or because it's about to expire, I'm going to go ahead and barrage. If I'm about to like drop my tempo stacks, I'm about to barrage. You can also do this a little bit earlier if you need to. Yeah. We'll cover the barrage conditions in more depth in the future video. We just don't have time for it in this one because it's already getting pretty long. But just like the general rules, I'm kind of giving you like the simplified version, right? That way you don't have to use a barrage helper. Just try to get something with your Intuition. Barrage into Touch of the Magi if it's 4 charges. And then, you know, barrage, obviously, if you run out of mana, you can barrage if you have 18 Arcane Harmony stacks and you can get back up with your orb. But really, you're just weighing like the cost of having to delay getting back into your damage by like dropping all your charges versus what you have currently, right? So orb is just something you can keep in your pocket as Sunfury. It's great. So, you know, rip that whenever you need to, but hopefully we don't need to use it, because if you're lucky, you don't really need to use it. Anyways, continuing along, right? So using Aether Attunement here, Blast Blast, Missiles, Blast Blast, and then I get Intuition proc there so I can use this Barrage. I just wanted to make sure I had another precision on it, and that was with Glorious Incandescence and Nether Precision and Intuition, so that was a pretty big Barrage right there. And it refreshed my tempo, and now we're just waiting on everything to come back. So this is the part where you could run out of mana if you're playing Spellslinger, but as Sunfury, we don't really have to worry about that. It's going to be pretty easy for us to stay above our mana threshold there. Anyways, yeah, so Missiling here, let it full channel because it's Aether Attunement. And then here we're approaching Burden of Power, so I know I'm going to have a Glorious Incandescence soon, which is great because my tempo is about to fall. So I'm probably going to want to make sure I make use of that right there. I just did that to refresh the tempo. Okay, anyways, yeah, it'd be probably better if I got another precision first, but I just didn't want to risk like losing the tempo there. Okay, anyways, so right here, we're getting an Intuition proc, and we have an Arcane Surge proc. Wahoo, we like that, right? Damage amp stacked with damage amp. It'd be even cooler if we could get a missiles on this, but we didn't get one, so I just send that barrage right there. Anyways, so Evocation's coming up soon, right? We're prepping for Evocation here. I'm just continuing along with my rotation here. I want to make sure I refresh that tempo because I'm about to evocate. That takes a lot of time, right? Evocation into Surge. You're barraging with the touch, but up until that point, it's going to take like 4 or 5 seconds, right? So make sure you're going with a fresh tempo before you use your Evocation here. And I'm just going to try to like build up Harmony stacks in the meantime. I think I used this barrage just because I wanted to get another refresh on the tempo, but I probably should have just not used this Intuition. Anyways, here I go for the Evocation, and I'm going to channel this Missile here. And then I've got Burden of Power already like ready to go, which is great. So anyways, we're going to do Arcane Surge here into 4. charge Barrage into Touch of the Magi. Remember the rule. Touch of the Magi is up. We Barrage before charges, right? It's going to be buffed by Burden and Power too, which is nice. And we have 8 Harmony stacks. Not too bad. Could have been better if I held with the Intuition there, but yeah. Well, I think this will be good because my tempo is about to fall, and it would have definitely fell, I think, here if I hadn't Barraged earlier. So I think that might have been the correct decision there. Yeah, just don't let your tempo fall. Like, if tempo is falling, that's bad. You just don't, like, one of the most important things in the rotation that, like, the simulation does for Arcane is it maintains the tempo. So obviously the robot's like following different logic for that, but as a player, you can like intuitively know when you need to barrage, and just if you're about to go into cooldowns, you should probably barrage, right? Because you're gonna lose your tempo if you don't, unless you just barraged. Okay, anyways, so Surge is ending here. We're gonna barrage into Touch, right? And right here I have Glorious Incandescence, Nether Precision. I mean, this is a great opportunity to just barrage again, right? So just barrage again. And then, oh, I get a Intuition proc, so guess what? I can barrage again. I'm gonna Missiles here first though. So Missiles and then Barrage at the very end there. It's fine if it only has like 0.1 seconds on the Intuition. Just make sure you get it in there. But I want to get it off with that Nether Precision. Anyway, so we're going to Blast here and then Missiles, and then we're going to clip the Missiles and we're going to Blast, and then we're doing the full Missiles here, right? Tempo's got 6 seconds left. We've got Glorious Incandescence. We're building up Harmony stacks here. We're going to go ahead and Barrage and then Blast here, and then we'll Missiles, and then we're coming up on the end here. And I barrage at the very last second there just to get one extra one in the Arcane Surge, because I'm going to get my 4 charges back instantly from the Arcane Soul. So here's Arcane Soul, and I can Missile here to get another Precision, and then Barrage, and then Missile again, and in with the Barrage. And there it is. So this is a full loop, right? It basically just happens like this over and over and over again. What we did at the end there with the Evocation is the same thing we did on the pole. The only difference is that it was later into combat, and we were able to have 4 charges going into it. This is basically all you need to know about Arcane for Raid. It's just this right here. Except for if there are additional targets and you have the AOE talent, you might also throw in a Barrage randomly elsewhere, right? Especially if you have like Harmony stacks up there, you can Barrage and then Orb afterwards. Since I haven't used Orb yet at all as Sunfury, like you don't have to use the Orb. You can just keep it in your pocket for whenever those AOE situations arise. So yeah, try to be on the lookout for using Orb and AOE. But other than that, this is basically the gist of it. Keep in mind though, whenever you are in Execute, you can also barrage more. Like your barrage actually hits harder in Execute. It's double damage. So if you have a way to get back your charges, like the Orb right here, if I wasn't pretending that this was a boss, right? If I was actually paying attention to the health, I would also want to barrage whenever I have like Nether Precision and other buffs stacked up. I would want to barrage and then Orb afterwards to get back up, right? So that's one case where you could use the Orb. But anyways, this is the Sunfury opener and the rotation for Raid. Now keep in mind for AoE in the Raid, as Sunfury, you're basically just doing the same thing as the single target rotation. You're just trying to funnel the damage onto the target, except for you're looking for situations where you can barrage and then you can Orb afterwards, especially if you have any of the other stuff that we talked about for the single target cases. In addition to that, if you do take high voltage in the Raid, if you have a clear casting available and you currently have Nether Precision and you have 4 charges, basically you can barrage and then you can Missiles afterwards to get your charges back. But other than that, you're basically just doing like the single target rotation unless you have the Orb available, and then you just barrage and then you send the Orb afterwards to get your charges back. So this is pretty much how Sunfury works in both situations. As Spellslinger and single target, we're basically doing the same opener, but keep in mind as Spellslinger, you don't have the Glorious Incandescence to help carry your barrages, so you're going to have to use more Arcane Orbs, but essentially we're following kind of like the same barrage logic as Sunfury, just we don't have that Glorious Incandescence. So don't be afraid to use the Orb whenever you have your buffs about to fall off, or if you have a tempo that's about to fall as well. Basically, you just barrage and then you Orb right afterwards. But it is a bit more of a balancing act, a bit more RNG if you don't have the high voltage, and this is why I generally prefer Sunfury in Raid. I just don't like having to be so reliant on my procs like happening last second. But yeah, free Orbs definitely help a lot, but you just kind of want to manage the rotation the way you do as Sunfury. Just, you know, basically just barrage if you have the Orb available. There is a situation where you might have to barrage even though you don't have something. It will happen sometimes, and you can just use an Intuition proc to get back to 4 charges. And if you don't have an Orb and you don't have anything else, no Intuition, no nothing, you can use Arcane Explosion to get back up. But this is something we generally want to avoid. It is better than Arcane Blast if you don't have charges, but again, you're just trying to shoot for those windows where you have the Orb available or you have the Intuition. It helps a lot to have the basically the tracker, right? Because you could basically see whenever the intuitions are coming, but you basically just want to kind of hang on there for dear life. In your AoE, you're going to be running basically these talents here on the right. Obviously, you have utility stuff that might change over here on the left, depending on if you're doing Mythic Plus and the key demands, remove curse, spell steal, etc. But in raid, you can run these talents here. And the biggest thing that's changing here is the high voltage talent. So high voltage is basically changing how we approach our arcane charge economy. Basically, it's like if you have no high voltage, if it's single target Spellslinger, then you're just trying to use orb anything less than 3 charges. And if you do have high voltage, we're kind of just trying to use our missiles whenever we have like 0 or 1 charge, right? Because in AoE, if you orb, it's pretty much going to fill them up. And if you have high voltage, then, you know, we want to orb first and then use the missiles, get whatever charges we can, because we're always going to be arcane blasting afterwards because we're going to have more than 2 charges there, right? So it's better if we have higher, since we're going to be spending that nether precision there on higher ones, getting more damage bonus. But anyway, the whole goal here is basically just to like get as many arcane barrages out as we possibly can, while also not getting stranded at 0 charges. Okay, typical arcane AoE opener is as follows. Obviously, get out your barrier, your mirror images. This is all happening before the pull, by the way. This is like as I see the tank is approaching the first couple mobs, if I'm going right away. Right, I want to get the evocation out of the way before combat begins. So be early with it. And don't be afraid to pull aggro. If you got your mirror images out, you can't pull threat with those out, okay? But if you don't have them, then be real quick to G-Invis if you pull threat. Okay, anyways, evocating, right? And then, so if I don't have the 4 here and I'm playing high voltage, typically I want to orb here. Now, there's another way you can do it. I'll show it in just a little bit, but yeah, anyway, so I'm going to orb here and then missiles, and now I have 4 charges, so we're good to go. I can do a surge into Barrage Touch right here. And then the next thing I do is a blast. I want to make sure that I pop this thing, Magi Spark. So I'm going to blast right here. And then we get the explosion right there. Boom. And then we're just looking to missiles and barrage. We basically just want to get nether precision for arcane charges and barrage. And the harmony charges are really nice too, right? We're getting those from the missiles as well. So right here I have like 20. So I definitely want a barrage right there. And yeah, just basically like missiles and barrage. And you're using the orb. Okay. Let's show what happens after the opener now. All right, let's start with a Mythic Plus example where there's like a long time before you actually get to doing your AoE damage, right? So like, let's say that there's a long pathway where the tank has to run and do their thing and group everything up, and you got plenty of time. In this case, you don't have to orb in the opener to get into your 4 charges, right? You can kind of like slow roll it. So let's imagine that I have my barrier up and I mirror image out. I just want to get those out so I don't accidentally pull threat on anything. If you're just hitting mobs that are kind of chasing after the tank, maybe at the tail end, you only have to 1 with your Arcane Explosion, and it only takes 2 here. So 2 Arcane Explosions is going to be enough to give you 2 charges here. And that's going to basically set us up perfectly because we're going to get 1 from Evocation and we're going to get 1 from our first missile through high voltage, and that's going to bring us to 4. So then we can evocate here, and this is hopefully still happening before you actually have the mobs grouped, right? And basically you're full channeling this, and then you're going to missile after this evocation. Okay, and then this missile is going to give you your 4th charge. So as soon as you get that 4th charge, that's when you start your Arcane Surge. And then right here, I'm probably going to proc an Intuition, but generally speaking, after you do your Barrage and the Touch, you want to do a Blast as soon as possible, just so that you get the pop. It's really hard to make sure you get that Blast in there if you forget to do it like at the start, because you're just going to like not remember that you even use it. But it's really important as Spellslinger that you get that pop on your Magi Spark. So fit a Blast in there, preferably early. Obviously, don't munch an Intuition to do it, right? So anyways, right here, Arcane Surge, Barrage and a Touch, right? There's my Intuition proc like I predicted. So I'm just going to go ahead and Barrage again. And now I'm going to Missile here, and I'm going to Blast into Barrage just to get the Blast out of the way. And then, so right there is the pop, right? And basically the goal is just, we want to be using Barrage at 4 charges with Nether Precision. However, if I have orbs available, I will actually go the extra mile. And I will even use it with Aether Attunement to get that Nether Precision. Okay, so my behavior is going to change if I have orbs or not, because orbs are basically the way that you fix this whole thing. If I do a Barrage and I get unlucky and I don't get anything, I can just use an orb and that fixes it, right? If I run out of orbs though, and I don't have any way to get those back, I will have to rely more on my missiles. So anyways, right here, I'm going to Aether Attunement and I'm going to Barrage here. And by the way, the distance you are from the target with your Aether Attunement actually matters, because the missiles have a travel time, right? So you can see here, they're all pretty much hitting right away. If I had 4 charges and I didn't have any orbs, I would want to make sure if I was using the missiles before the Barrage, so like I need to get the Nether Precision right, let's say, I would do it from further away. That way I could Barrage afterwards and I would still get my charges. I'll show that in a little bit. But anyways, yeah, just Barraging here, Obviously, if you don't get your charges, you can send it there. I did a blast there just because I didn't want to send the orb, but yeah, I probably should have orbed there. Anyways, right here, we have our orb available, so we send that, and then we barrage. Or actually, that was an orb proc, so we didn't even have to use an orb. Here, I'll use an orb, and then barrage. It's really good on that last nether precision to like throw the orb in there. Basically, it's like you barrage, and then you miss, right? You don't get the orb returned. You still have one nether precision. You don't want to munch that with the missile if you don't have to, so you just orb afterwards, and then you barrage again. Like so. And then so right here, like I could use this Aether Attunement missile if I was further away to fully channel it and barrage straight from it at the very end and get my charges back. Or if I'm close, I can just use it up close and not worry about the charges and barrage afterwards, and then I have the orb still. And basically, after you're done using all of your orbs and outside of cooldowns, you're looking to shifting power at some point here. Basically, I have like 10 seconds to shifting power. So what I typically do is I go until I run out of luck. So, you know, just kind of like gamba until you just get super unlucky, right? So here I'm getting fairly lucky, so I just keep going, but I am keeping in mind the time left on my Touch of the Magi. Right here, I finally lost. This is just in time, right? 15 seconds, so I'm going to shifting power here. And there's a fairly good chance as you're doing the shifting power that one of your splinters is going to proc. On the dummies, they go like everywhere, so you don't see them on my targets, but they're like behind me. There's a good chance one's going to proc and randomly shoot out an orb, right? So just keep that in mind. And then basically if you're at, you know, 0 charges here, you're just going to orb, right? So if I don't get an orb, I'm just going to use the orb right away from the shifting power. I could alternatively just put Touch of the Magi out, but instead I'm putting out the orb. I'm going to prep another precision. I'm going to barrage into touch here. Don't delay the touch too much though. Right here, right after I touch, I do an Arcane Blast. And I'm going to missiles here and then barrage, right? And that's basically like the whole idea. Is you're just trying to get out as many nether precision 4-charge arcane barrages as possible. If you don't have the nether precision, you want to get it. If you can't get it, then you just go with the 4, and that's fine. And just keep barraging as much as you can. If you run out of stuff and you've already shifting powered, you already used all your orbs, you have no clear casting left, it's like you're going down the row, right? One by one, you're running out of options. No clear cast left? Okay. Well, in that case, if you barrage, if you choose to do AoE over funnel, then you're just going to have to use Arcane Explosion afterwards probably. And you'll probably get a proc from that, either Intuition, or you'll get a missiles, or you get something, right? But that's essentially the idea here. So like right here, I don't really have anything, so I just use Arcane Explosion, right? And then look, I get stuff, right? That's just kind of how it works. And I can just barrage, and then I'll be able to missiles and barrage again. But yeah, Aether Attunement is very effective at filling up your charges, right? So make sure you're utilizing that as kind of like a backup orb if you don't have the orb. So if I'm out of orbs and I have another precision, or even if I don't, if an Aether Attunement missile is the one that's next, and I have only one missile left, I'm going to barrage first and then use the Aether Attunement afterwards, basically as a way to get my charges back instead of securing the nether precision, right? The goals kind of change there. Also, if I have Aether Attunement and I don't have nether precision, I need to get it, right? And I have a missile here, and I'm out of orbs, let's say. What I could do here if I'm mid-range is if I start the missile and I immediately go out and I barrage at the very end, I'm going to get charges back. See that? And so this is kind of like a way to manipulate the travel time on the missiles so that you can basically have the advantage of being far away and the advantage of being close. It just takes a little practice to get both down. And obviously be really careful whenever you're blinking, right? Because if I turn around to blink and then I shoot an orb in this direction, right at the wrong time, I might hit a pack over there, right? So just be very mindful. It's kind of like whenever you're doing any sort of like archery or practice, you know, at like a shooting range, like you need to make sure you're facing downrange. And Arcane's kind of the same idea. Like you don't want to be facing in any direction where it could be dangerous, because you could just randomly shoot that orb when you don't mean to, right? And then boom, you're pulling stuff that you didn't mean to, and now everyone in the dungeon's mad at you, and you're wiping, and the key's depleted, and yeah, just be very, very careful with that. So yeah, just keep in mind the trick with Arcane Explosion, using that Weakaura that tracks when your intuition is proccing, that you can basically prep it between every pull. You don't have to hit anything with Arcane Explosion. It's just good to set that up. Also, I'm going to include a link to Porom's Barrage Helper in the description below if you want to use that as like a guideline whenever you practice, to be able to check your own knowledge of barraging versus what the sim does. Just keep in mind, some of these conditions may not be as big of a gain as other ones. For me personally, like I find the Barrage Helper to be a bit distracting, and I just kind of stare at it the whole time whenever I review my own footage, but obviously everyone's different and it might be really helpful to you, so I'll include it in there. Talents and everything will be linked in the description below as well, and we also have the Metafy link if you're interested in the one-on-one coaching. And other than that, if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.